I couldn't put two and two together as to what was going on, and my parents weren't medically qualified. And they, even if I said, I was actually quite afraid to tell them. So, and I don't know why. Just like, it's so weird, that you brought that up. But I can remember back then, and I thought, I'm going through hell, and I don't know what to say to them. And it was as
Excellent. Okay. All right. It looks like we're good to go. So welcome to the first ever interview here on the Aussie UFO podcast. I'm your host, Nick Knowles, and I'm super excited to have our guest on here tonight. He's been involved in the UFO research community since 1978. He was originally a member for the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, or APRO, which later, I believe, one of their founding members started the offshoot that is now MUFON. Is that correct?
Well, it was Coral and Jim Lorenzen. So basically, I think they maintained APRO until a certain period of time, but I'm sure that they were sort of like they knew about MUFON and they might have been involved in some stage. But MUFON's a spin-off from the closure of Project Blue Book. So it was called the Midwestern UFO Network. So, and then it got changed to Mutual UFO Network. But Coral and Jim in APRO were separate to MUFON because they still had APRO as an organization while MUFON was in existence, as far as I'm aware.
Right. Okay. And I should probably mention that your name is Dr. Roger Stankovich, right? That's not Croatian?
Yep. Croatian, yeah.
Excellent. Wow. Okay. There you go. Lucky guess. So our guest tonight is actually the national director of MUFON, or the Mutual UFO Network, and has been since 2015. Completed a Bachelor of Science at Sydney University, majoring in zoology, and later completed his PhD in neuroscience in 2006 at the same institution. Published several scientific papers on the topic of motor neuron disease and other topics such as dementia. He's a current lecturer at Ultimo TAFE. Have I said that right?
Yep.
As well as a member of the UAP Medical Coalition, which we were just talking about. And so let me get this straight, Roger. The UAP Medical Coalition is a group dedicated to the serious consideration of medical issues, sort of post-experience for those who have encountered UAPs or UFOs.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct, yeah. So
Excellent.
we also, it's a bit more broader than that. So basically, the organization is also looking at post-disclosure effects on people. So maybe they, there's going to be some ontological shock when this happens, or if it does happen. And so we're looking at that psychological aspect, as well as not just proximity to a UFO and the effects from a UFO.
Right, yeah, and this is actually a topic that I'd really love to discuss a little later on tonight. Now, I've also got in my notes here that you were also featured in a television program called Close Encounters Down Under, overseas in Britain. And so before we get into MUFON and your career, you have spoken about in the past quite extensively, in my opinion, but just for the sake of any listeners that may be joining us fresh out the gate with no prior experience or no exposure, you actually had a UFO sighting yourself on your parents' sort of acreage in rural West Sydney when you were a teenager. This is 1974, 75. Would you mind sort of
something like that,
putting us there? What is it that run us through what happened?
Okay, so I as a teenager, I would go down. My parents had a 25-acre property, which is about 10 hectares, and it was in those days there was not much to do as a kid, and apart from ride a bike around the property or drive the tractor, or you had to just entertain yourself. So basically,
Yeah.
all I'd do is just go down the paddock for a walk, and you discover like fossils, and you go down to the creek bed and whatever, and you try and entertain yourself as a kid. And I'd skip stones on the dam. So I was on the bottom dam. We had two dams, but I was at the bottom dam, which is on the eastern side of the property, and it was getting twilight, so it would have been summer, but it's really hard to remember the whole thing, and because it was such a long time ago, and I was quite young, but I remember that it was twilight. It was probably summer, and basically what happened is that there was a light that I caught in the corner of my eye that was coming from the south, going north, and basically it was just a light in the sky. And I didn't even turn my head to look at it, but I just noticed it from my peripheral vision. Didn't think too much of it, and I just kept looking forward until it sort of like came up closer, and then I thought, oh, what is that? A plane? A helicopter? I can't hear any noise, and just sort of like not really a sphere, because it wasn't circumscribed. It was sort of like a light, like a star, but much larger. So it was about the size of a 5-cent coin held at arm's distance when it got right in front of me. So that's quite large. And you sort of think, well, what the hell is that, So basically, like all sorts of things went through my head thinking, what the hell is that? And then it did a bit of a maneuver, which was quite odd, because if it was a helicopter or anything else, you'd sort of think, how did it execute that maneuver? So, and then just a split second after it did that, so it was about 300 meters away from me, so it's pretty close. And then it just zipped down to the ground and lit up the whole area. And it frightened the crap out of me. So I just raced off back to the farmhouse, and that was it. I didn't want to hang around because I sort of thought, well, I don't know what the hell that is, and it's at very close proximity. I don't know what's going to come out of it, and I just didn't want to hang around. But I could have kicked myself today not doing that, because I sort of thought, well, I could have seen something fairly significant because it was close range, and when I ran back to the farmhouse, I just didn't turn my head, to look, and it was just, I don't know, I just felt really quite disturbed by the whole incident. It was like, I thought, I don't know what this is. It's some anomalous thing. I didn't know too much about UFOs in those days. I sort of like knew about, like the Marty the Martian cartoon and, Outer Limits and all that sort of stuff, which, there's another program which was called Twilight Zone. I don't think I watched Twilight Zone, but certainly
Right.
the Outer Limits was one of the series, and as a kid that I used to watch, it was quite frightening. So I knew about those sort of things, but I didn't really think that these UFOs were real. I thought they were fiction. And so after that, it just piqued my curiosity so much that I just never forgot about it. But for a period of time, I basically would read books about it. So I read literally hundreds of books on UFOs, or magazines, whatever I could get my hands on. I was a bit of a sponge, and that's all I'd read. That's all I would read. I wouldn't read anything else. And so it piqued my curiosity, and it sort of like would wax and wane throughout the years. Sometimes I'd think, oh no, I don't deal with it, and then again I'd get interested in it when I'd read something about it in the newspapers, or if there was something in social media about it, and it would again just trigger off this urge to want to get involved again, till about 2015, when I sort of like thought, oh, I want to get really, I want to do something proactive about this. So I joined MUFON, which I had to do a bit of research because I didn't know when I was a member of APRO, but basically all you did as a member of APRO was just to receive a newsletter, and if you had a sighting, you'd report it to them, but that was it. And there weren't many members of APRO in those days. I think I heard some figures bandied about, but I would have been probably amongst a handful of people in Australia as a member of APRO in those days.
If it helps at all, I grew up in a very similar kind of situation on a 33-acre kind of vineyard farm in rural Victoria here, and I remember when I was looking a bit into your background, I was watching, for anyone listening right now, actually, there's a fantastic depiction that you kind of attempted to give through some photo imagery and some diagrams of your experience. That's the UFO Research Incorporated New South Wales video, if people want to find it on YouTube. And I was really putting myself in my own shoes, because I guess I've never really had a UAP or UFO experience, but as a child, I would be bored out of my mind on this huge property with nothing to do. And I would often go and sit on top of the water tanks that my parents had. And I would sort of watch the sun go down and look at the stars and things like that. So I would often think to myself, because I had this curiosity about UFOs and the potential of alien life, I would think about, how incredible would it be to, see something up there in the stars right now. So listening back to your story of you being a teenager and seeing this thing, it really struck a chord with me, which is part of the reason I decided to reach out. But look, I know we've only been speaking for about 10 minutes now, and I hope this isn't too personal, but in that same UFO Research Inc. video, you mentioned that when you were quite young, you would have these panic attacks that would revolve around the same stimuli that you were just mentioning before, Marvin the Martian, the Outer Limits. And I can understand that kind of naive, like, childhood terror at that eeriness of it. But I guess what I'm wondering is, did that dissipate over time? Did it just simply maturate? Or,
it did. So, like you put, it's a very good word, maturated. So I stopped having the panic attacks at about 13, but I'd read a bit of the literature on it, and it's extremely rare for kids to have panic attacks. And I would have mine in the middle of the night while I was asleep, and I'd wake up with a panic attack. And I couldn't put two and two together as to what was going on. And my parents weren't medically qualified. They, even if I said, I was actually quite afraid to tell them. And I don't know why. Just like, it's so weird, that you brought that up. But I can remember back then, and I thought, I'm going through hell, and I don't know what to say to them. And it was as if I did tell them, something was going to do something to me, So I don't know. It's really weird, and can't explain it. And I never said to anyone that I'm being abducted or anything like that, because I didn't know what was going on. But I know for a fact that some of the panic attacks would happen during the day. I remember one instance where I felt tired, and I don't know how I managed to just drop off and go to sleep in the middle of the day in the house, but then I woke up and it was completely dark, and I just lost half a day, and had a panic attack when I woke up, because I thought, what the hell happened then, And there was another instance where I had most of the panic attacks, as I said, would happen in the night, and I find that very hard to understand, because usually panic attacks happen while you're conscious and awake and everything. But I would have that'd be like, I just pray that I would not have a panic attack, because it was really quite disturbing. The panic attacks are really, and even maybe not even panic attacks. They were sort of like, how can I put it? Just a disconnection with reality, and it would just something would switch in my brain, and it would hard to describe. Like a
Is it similar
disconnection.
to the occurrence of night terrors?
Um, it could be. I haven't really read up on night terrors, but I I know that they were very disabling. So
Hmm.
basically, it affected my studies at school, and because I'd go into depression about it. And I was very weary about it because I think, how do I get out of not having this panic attack? To stave this panic attack from happening. So, and yeah, I still hadn't resolved it. When I went to uni, I I just used to ask psychology students. I know that I asked this a mate of mine who was doing psychology, and I described to him what was happening to me. And I just was clutching at straws, trying to find out with anyone if anyone could actually work out what was happening to me.
Right.
And yeah, so yeah, still don't know what happened.
Was there something that was able to kind of mitigate the intensity of these things? Were there any strategies that kind of helped?
I I tried everything. Tried running my head under cold water.
Hmm.
That was one of the things as a kid. I thought, what about if I run cold water over my head?
Huh.
Take it, I just, yeah, I couldn't do anything. I just, once it gripped me, you could feel it coming on, and I'm thinking, holy shit, what the hell's going on? And I just, yeah, and my parents didn't understand what was going on. So, but things that would trigger, I remember when I was watching a sci-fi movie, and there could have been aliens in it, that just bang happened then.
Huh.
So yeah,
Instantaneously, or it was more like you
instantaneously.
knew, okay,
I
tonight.
didn't even know. Like I sort of was interested in watching this program, and I think
Hmm.
it was the Outer Limits, but I was quite young, and basically it would have been about 7 maybe, and I thought, oh great, Outer Limits, let's put it on.
Right.
And everyone was, my sisters were there, and I remember, we turned on the TV, and it was probably the Bolero Shield or something, that episode, and then when I started watching it, this alien was being pulled down by a beam, and wham, panic attack, massive panic attack.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so just to clarify, when you say panic attack, you're talking about the very textbook, hyperventilation, extreme
Oh,
autonomic
worse than that.
arousal, just
Worse than that. Yeah,
right.
worse than that. It would just, how could I describe it? I Yeah, it's really hard to describe because it's it was sort of like more than a panic attack. It was sort of like, um, feeling that you're on a different planet, or you're just like disorientated, and your thought processes have just been completely fucked up by something. It was just sort of like something's, like just completely screwing with your brain.
Wow, very jarring, I'd imagine. I mean,
Yeah, very, very jarring.
and there
Yeah.
is something so relatable about that childhood experience of being like, no, I really want to watch this thing because it seems mature and interesting, and at the same time, that childlike terror over the unknown. But
Yeah.
look, I studied psychology at university. I never graduated. I'm really not much of an academic. Which, if any of my friends ever watch this podcast, they're probably laughing very hard right now. But uh, have you ever seen the film? It's a Mila Jovovich film. The woman from The Fifth Element. It's called The Fourth Kind.
No.
I'll be honest, it's a bit of a trashy film, but I don't mean to at all insert some kind of false memory here, but it's about a psychiatrist who realizes that many of her clients that she's treating in Alaska have this same nightly dread of going to sleep. And
That's what I used to have.
well, they wake up feeling like they haven't rested, and then she realizes that all of them are having the same nightmare about an owl staring at them.
Right.
And of
Well,
course,
owls are associated with UFOs.
okay, well there you go. But
Yeah.
as the film goes on, and it's a work of fiction,
Yeah.
But as the film goes on, she realizes that there's something a lot more nefarious going on. And I
Yeah.
only just watched it recently. I think it came out in 2009.
What is it called again? Sorry,
The Fourth Kind.
The Fourth Kind. Okay, it's
Yeah.
on YouTube.
I don't know if it's on YouTube. I'm sure people can legally procure themselves a copy somehow, but there is. It may even be on Netflix. I look. I don't recommend. It's hardly a Spielberg masterpiece or anything, but it terrified me. If I'm honest, I finished watching it just recently and went to bed next to my fiance, and I remember crawling into bed and just thinking. I don't know how well I'm going to sleep tonight, and I don't scare very easily. But
Yeah.
anyway, so moving on to or focusing in on MUFON, which is what you kind of do present day. How is it that you became the head of MUFON Australia, and what is it that your role entails? Day to day or week to week.
Okay. So I joined MUFON in 2015, and then basically the number of field investigators in MUFON Australia was fairly limited. There was only about 3 or 4, and the then current director decided for whatever reason she didn't want to do the job anymore. So she suggested me to the United States, and then they asked me whether I'd take that job on, and basically I said yes because I think they were interested in me because of the amount of detail that I put into the reports.
Right.
So we get reports from people in Australia who usually they'd Google up MUFON or report a UFO, and they'd get onto the MUFON website, and then if they saw a UFO, that's what they do, and then that report would go to the States to a computer server there, and then if they put obviously country of origin, it's Australia to get then the national director gets an email saying somebody's wants to report a UFO in Australia, and then we get the details of it, and then so I was a field investigator for a short period of time. They're impressed with the way I put a lot of detail into the reports. In terms of what we try and do is to eliminate what it could possibly be if it's like you've got to eliminate what if somebody sees what they think is a UAP or UFO. We've got to analyze where did it happen, what time was it, were there any aircraft around, was it a celestial object? You've got to eliminate all those prosaic things that and if you eliminated all the prosaic possible reasons what it could be, then you can only come to a conclusion that it's an unknown. So we don't call it a UAP or a UFO, we just call it an unknown, and as such it stays as an unknown until you find more information out, and then you could say, oh look, it was probably military plane or whatever, or we just leave it as an unknown.
I have. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I have noticed that there is a very there's kind of a lot of trigger discipline when it comes to certain language in the UFO community. And I'm not espousing to be an expert at all. Honestly, this podcast, for example, is a bit of a passion project that was brewing for a long time, and I've literally only decided to pull the trigger on it in the last couple of weeks. But I've noticed that you have the UFO terms slowly sort of being converted across to UAP, or in Congress, you notice that people will refer to things as non-human intelligence or non-human biologics, as opposed to saying the A word, which is going to, one thing that's really discouraged me in some ways is seeing in the mainstream media still these kind of suggestive grins and raised eyebrows that you get from reporters who are covering the stories. It still just doesn't quite seem to be taken seriously, maybe as a way of preserving one's reputation and integrity in some ways. I think it's a bit of a taboo subject. There's a lot of progress being made, but
there is, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of progress being made, and basically every reporter that's spoken to me, I've been on ABC Radio, I've been in the Daily Telegraph, I've been on documentaries. No one has ever ridiculed to me. All the reporters are very respectful that have spoken to me, and they've never ever done anything in the media that have shown, like that have in any way tried to put a spin on it that might be, like like putting a spin on it that might ridicule the topic, even before, or after the interview.
Oh, that's excellent. That's really refreshing to hear. I guess I saw a clip on YouTube, an interview, and this is dating back to the 1988 Nullarbor Plains incident with the Knowles family, where I'm not even going to say his name, but a certain media personality who's still quite outspoken today on social media finished his whole interview with them saying something like, "Why does this only happen to Iowa corn farmers and never Nobel Peace Prize winners?" And just to kind of twist the knife at the very end of that interview was just disgusting, in my opinion. But
I just ignore them. I mean, basically, if they, I don't really care. If people want to have that really narrow-minded attitude, a lot of them haven't been exposed to the data. A lot of them haven't actually looked at the data. They haven't actually read anything about it. And this is what makes them so ignorant and wet behind the ears about about the phenomenon. And I think they're just embarrassing themselves by actually putting that sort of spin on it.
Well, hopefully, with what's happening in Congress, or I guess it's an if or when situation, but hopefully there will be a day in the coming months or years where there'll be a bit of a I told you so moment, I suppose. But
we don't have to wait for that. I know for a fact that there are craft that have been recovered. There's absolutely 100%, without any doubt, they're here.
Well, I think that ever since the New York Times article, and you have, for example, people like David Grush, Christopher Mellon, David Fravor coming forward, Ryan Graves as well. These aren't crackpots. These are really, really reliable people of very sturdy character coming forward and exposing that there is information that really needs to be released to the public. So, yeah, look, for me personally, I certainly believe that just on a matter of probability that there has to be some life out there, whether it's here or not, and whether the aerial phenomena that people are reporting, whether these things are being piloted by a biological entity or whether it's something else. I think that when I say we, I mean humanity, we owe it to ourselves to explore this. So it can just be very frustrating to hear it at times. I think we're doing a lot better now, but hear it being treated as a novel subject. Would you be able to provide some insights into the activities of MUFON in Australia and New Zealand? Like, is it strictly receiving reports and investigating, or is there anything else that MUFON undertakes?
Well, it's receiving reports and investigating them, and then filing the report away. It's all online. Sometimes we actually go out of the field and meet the person that's actually seen the UFO, but that's pretty rare. Usually, everything's done online with a phone call or a Skype session, or I use MS Teams. So you can, if there's a lot of data that you have to go through in terms of videos, photographs, occasionally we get physical evidence.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically we've got that aspect of it. We've got the aspect of abductions. People think that they've been abducted, and we have a specialised team called an ERT team that deals with abductions. So we've got one field
Right.
investigator that specifically deals with those.
Sorry
those
to cut
cases.
you off. There was a member of that team is actually someone who reached out to me and said, listen, Roger is someone that you should have on your podcast if this is a road that you want to go down. And so to clarify, so if MUFON doesn't just deal with necessarily UFO sightings, but the abduction experience as well, you mentioned physical evidence. By that, do you mean things like effects on the human body post experience?
Well, that would be handled by the RT team if there was physical evidence on the body, like a mark or something like a scoop mark, or sometimes people have things like red marks on their body when they think they've been abducted during the night. Or what I mean by physical evidence is basically evidence as like something's landed on the ground and you've got an impression on the ground. Cattle mutilations where you've got like physical evidence. You've got a dead cow. You've got bizarre sort of like excisions done on it. Crop circles. Recently, we had a lady who reported being pushed by a UAP on the road while she was driving her van
in Queensland, right?
That's right. And
right.
We got dust particles off her vehicle, and then analysed them. We found out that there was a strange combination of copper cadmium. Was it copper cadmium? I think it was. No. Sorry, I'll have to retract that. It was a combination of heavy metals that was unusual for it to be in a metallic form here on Earth.
Wow.
And that was done by a very specialised laboratory. So we have EDX, which is like an X-ray microanalysis machine, which it's not a machine; it's like electron microscope, which can do spectral analysis on dust particles or metals or whatever. So it's highly specialised equipment. That's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we did do the analysis on that, and it was copper barium. Sorry, not copper, cadmium. Copper barium alloy of 80-20%, which is very rare on Earth, and it's not. You can get it in a powdered form on Earth, but not a metallic form. This was in a metallic form. So the altercation with this object caused some of that, some particles to come off it, and we analysed that. So that's physical evidence.
I understand that in the subsequent police investigation of the vehicle involved in the Knowles family incident back in '88, the Knowles family were reporting that the car was flooded with black dust, and then the subsequent investigation found no trace of that. But isn't it interesting that, in one case in '88, you have this example of this craft lifting a car into the air. And I have heard you discuss this case from Queensland in that the tyres didn't screech. It almost seemed as though the car wasn't in contact with the ground after it had been moved, or I would assume so. If
from what I remember, the car was lifted off the road, and it was dropped, and one of the tyres blew.
In the Nullarbor Plains incident, you mean?
Yeah.
Right. I think one of the
unless I got it wrong.
I do remember them saying that one of the rear suspension springs had fractured and that the rear tire, I think it was the right rear tire, had exploded. But I could be remembering wrong.
I spoke to one of the investigators who actually did the analysis on the vehicle back in was it 88 or I can't remember 87, 88. And he told me, so he was a scientist that was involved in analysis of the dust particles, and he said there was nothing anomalous in the dust particles there. But there's been instances where there have been green lights or teardrop-shaped objects that have been associated with vehicles, and so the one that I've just told you about, the lady that was driving up north in Queensland, that's not the only vehicle that's been involved in something like this, and there have been other cases, and there are a list of cases that have undergone similar instances, and we're looking at investigating that. I've got just so much on my plate, I haven't actually got around to investigating that. And I think the lady that was involved in this incident might be writing a book about that, and I said I'd co-author it with her, but
wow,
I haven't actually done that yet. I've just got so many fingers in the pie.
I can imagine. I understand that MUFON, as a primarily volunteer-led organization, it must just,
yes,
you've got two distinct countries full of people, and a limited amount of people to do the legwork. So I can imagine you would definitely have your hands full. To circle back to that more recent Queensland incident,
yep.
Is there any speculation as to why this particular element would be, like, was there a conventional explanation at all offered by those analysing the metal in the powder? None whatsoever.
It's anomalous.
Wow. Okay.
Mm.
I would
that testing was done by one of the best laboratories in Australia. They did an actual report on it, and it's as if it was a scientific paper. And I'm trying now. I've got another project which was to actually convert their report into a scientific article for the SCU, which is the Scientific Coalition in UAP Studies, which is quite a prestigious organisation which I'm part of in the United States, which they hold annual meetings, and so I'm trying to convert that report into a scientific paper to publish at the SCU. So
I would love to hear any updates as to what happens with that, because that really sounds like very solid evidence that something has happened, as opposed to the Nullarbor Plains incident where you have them saying that there's negligible analysis to be run on.
I've got no doubt that something happened to that family, because if you see the interview with I can't remember who the reporter was, but they seem fairly credible. They seem like a fairly simple family, like they're but they seem fairly credible, and like they're just telling a story that they experienced. So even though there's no scientific evidence to back it up, I think the case is credible on the side of witness. The witnesses that there were multiple witnesses there. It wasn't if it was just one person in the car, and there is physical damage to the car. So so multiple witnesses. It's not the first time that there's been an altercation with a car and an object of anomalous nature. It's happened in America, where a police vehicle was hit by an object, and it left physical damage on the vehicle, and the policeman was knocked unconscious. And
the antenna as well, right? I remember there was a very similar case in New Zealand where tragically there was a casualty, and I understand that there were a lot of difficulties with the FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act, with the police department there, which is
that's still ongoing. And I'm still working with a lawyer over that. But I've come to. I can't talk too much about that. There's some things that I can't talk about at this stage, because my the researcher that's working on it with me is communicating with the ombudsman and other people who I just can't say too much about it at the moment, and there might be NDAs involved in it. Yeah.
Of course, yeah. I mean, I know that there was quite a lot of media press coverage about it at the time, but the cited reason for a lot of the stonewalling, for lack of a better word, has been that it's about privacy, which I mean,
No.
oof.
No, there's no privacy involved in that, because basically the names were all out in the media. And whenever I present the case at a meeting, I exclude the names, and even though it's well known who these people are. So just as a precaution, I don't include their names. I don't know. And the police are just saying, oh, it's to do about privacy, but it's all out there. And then we inquired about, well, what privacy are you talking about, considering that this has been in the press and everyone knows their names. And then they said, oh, it's just a privacy issue about the detail in the incident. I don't know what they're talking about in particular, but so I think it's just stonewalling, definitely, and there's something very, very unusual about it, and I don't know. I emailed my partner about it recently, and I haven't heard anything back from him, because maybe he's been told not to talk to me again.
Interesting. Is there anything that sets us apart internationally or globally? Australia, that is, and I suppose I include New Zealand begrudgingly in this question. But is there anything that sets us apart in terms of the UAP UFO reports that are coming in?
Not really. From who? The States or the rest of the world? Or?
Well, yeah. So I suppose one of the reasons that I ask is I often hear it argued that, for example, in the United States, you have the Area 51, and you have a lot of.
We've got Pine Gap. So.
Well, that's sort of where I was going with this. So, for example, in the US, they obviously have far, far more developed nuclear weapon program, and there are often these reports of craft interacting and sometimes even demonstrating some ability to operate or shut down these weapons, which is a terrifying reality. So would you speculate that maybe it's due to Australia's lack of nuclear weapon resources? Or, I mean, I do hear a lot about Pine Gap, and I know that the US has a joint base there here in the Northern Territory.
Well, due to the lack of nuclear warheads, we don't have that happening here. We don't have the same thing that's happening in the States, where you see UAPs hovering around nuclear facilities. So, although people do cite them, we don't have that aspect. We do have cattle mutilations. We do have some crop circles, which are might be tenuously associated with UAPs. It hasn't been proven, but we're tending to think that. And we see what happens overseas predominantly happens everywhere, in particular here, apart from, the UAPs interfering with nukes, because we don't have any.
Right.
If we had them, I'm sure they'd be here.
Yeah, geez. It's, I mean, the Pine Gap stuff is fascinating. I've looked into some of the purported sightings that have occurred during or at that location. For example, I think there was a particularly famous one where I think it was three males were coming back from some sort of hunting trip. I could be wrong on some of the specifics here, but they reported that they saw a hatch of some kind, like a hidden opening, open up, and that an aircraft came up out of the hatch. Do you still receive any reports surrounding around the Pine Gap area?
We received a report near Exmouth, which is sort of that's not really near Pine Gap, but it was there's a facility there, I think it's the Harold Holt I forgot the exact term for it, but there's a massive installation there, which was put there in the 60s, I believe, to actually communicate, to work out whether there was any activity around that particular area in terms of nuclear submarines or whatever. So basically, it's and that information would be relayed back to the States. There was a craft, a triangular craft, massive triangular craft that was seen there at the time in the 90s, and that's one instance where you've got this facility that's located in a specific area that's involved in communicating the presence of foreign maybe nuclear submarines or whatever, and basically then you've got this massive triangular craft that's seen. I don't get any reports from Pine Gap. Not many. It's pretty deserted around there, and basically, it's a secret, facility that's. Sorry, my son's in my room. I'm getting distracted.
Hey, that's okay. Extra guests are always welcome. But so I guess I'm also hearing that due to the secrecy of that facility, that you have fewer eyes, or at least fewer people who are able to disclose what's happening. And so thus, yeah, I mean, are there any areas of Australia that seem to be, I know that Wycliffe Well, for example, is a very well-known tourist hotspot, but Narre Warren, actually, I heard a few different places online discussing Narre Warren, which I felt kind of a weird sense of pride because that's actually where I've grown up. And we have the famous Kelly Cahill case. Are there any areas that seem to be a little more high traffic?
We tried to do a bit of research on that because we tried to correlate particular areas in Australia with UFO sightings, and it was quite difficult because obviously, as you said, it's in the big cities are where you get most of the sightings because it's just a number of eyes in the sky, the night sky and the day sky. And what we tried to do is normalize that. So basically, we were trying to look at our statistics in terms, and our stats only go back to 2000 for the current database. Prior to 2000, we didn't have a electronic database, but in this current electronic database, we go back to 2000. You can actually search. There's a search engine there. You can put in various keywords, and it will come up with sightings in a particular area and what object was actually sighted, whether it was an orb, triangle, or whatever. So we tried to do this, but it was getting out of hand, and we sort of just canned the whole project, put it on the back burner, because we were trying to just work out where are the hot spots. So where are the UFOs being seen most? But then again, you come into difficulties doing that because when you call something a UAP or a UFO, some investigators I've noticed they'll classify something which maybe another field investigator would not classify as a UAP.
Right.
It just depends upon how involved the researcher is and how rigorous they are in trying to eliminate all the different possibilities. And then again, you run into difficulties again, because if somebody's seen a UAP, doesn't necessarily mean that it's a UAP. It could have been misidentified. So do you put a dot there saying that's where a UAP was seen, but we've actually classified as a helicopter that they saw in the middle of the night,
Right.
So it becomes really difficult because none of the UAPs that have been reported have actually been identified as spacecraft. So,
Right. Yeah.
because we've got to have physical evidence, you actually have to have the craft to say, there it is. It's a craft. We don't know where it's come from, and it's anomalous. It's got all these, it's anti-gravity, etc. So it's so hard to actually determine where these hot spots are, and all you're basing it on is just the witnesses' account.
Mm.
So, and if you try and do that statistically, because I teach statistics, so basically I tried to do some massage data with a statistical program, and to see whether there was more sightings in one area than another, and it just became too difficult.
I'm getting so many terrible flashbacks to having to operate SPSS at university, so I can totally understand.
Yeah.
I mean, hence the controlled use of the word unknown, right? Which, as you were saying, I suppose I understand that you index your sightings in terms of the credibility of the character of the witness, which you've expressed some discontent with in the past, as well as the number of witnesses, for example. But I can understand that it would be very difficult to have a standardized, this is an unknown, and this is exactly what classifies an unknown, purely because that's exactly what it is. It's an unknown.
They're all convinced that it's absolutely nobody on Earth doing this, and it's not dingoes or anything. They're very experienced farmers. They know, they know when their cattle die, what they die from, etc. But they're saying that this is definitely extraterrestrial. That's happening.
Dr. Roger Stankovich will join us again in the next episode. Thank you all so much for listening to the Aussie UFO podcast. Please make sure to stay up to date, that you find us on Facebook and YouTube. Hit like, hit follow, and subscribe, and we will see you in the next episode. Bye for now.